and the military attacked for the last 50 years by the Barbara box of viruses on our planet.
Political liberals aren't the only targets of Savage's wrath. Back when he had a cable TV show, he bashed gay men.
So you're one of those sodomites.
Yeah.
Are you a sodomite?
Yes, I am.
Oh, you're one of the sodomites. You should only get AIDS and die, you pig. How's that? Why don't you see if you can sue me, you pig? You got nothing better than to put me down, you piece of garbage? You got nothing to do today? Go eat a sausage and choke on it. Get trichinosis.
And on his radio show, he targeted kids with autism.
I'll tell you what autism is in 99% of the cases. It's a brat who hasn't been told to cut the act out. That's what autism is. What do you mean they scream and they're silent? They don't have a father around to tell them, don't act like a moron, you'll get nowhere in life. Stop acting like a putz. Straighten up, act like a man. Don't sit there crying and screaming, idiot.
Fire Savage now!
That outburst prompted protests by outraged parents, and a few stations dropped Savage's show. So did an advertiser. But Savage hasn't apologized, and he's still on the air.
America's being overrun by an invasion force from Mexico that'll soon take over the country. You psychotic liberals don't even know you're digging your own grave and throwing lime in there. All it's missing is the worm from the tequila bottle to go with it.
Michael Savage isn't the only right-wing talk radio host who launches blistering, even violent verbal attacks on people and groups he doesn't like. Glenn Beck, for instance, fantasized about murdering a liberal filmmaker.
I'm thinking about killing Michael Moore, and I'm wondering if I could kill him myself or if I would need to hire somebody to do it. I think I could. I think he could be looking me in the eye, and I could just be choking the life out. Is this wrong?
Michael Reagan, son of the former president, suggested that people who claim that 9/11 was an inside job, a U.S. government conspiracy, deserve to die.
Take them out and shoot them. They are traitors to this country, and shoot them. But anybody who would do that doesn't deserve to live. You shoot them. You call them traitors, that's what they are, and you shoot them dead. I'll pay for the bullet.
Neil Bortz went after victims of Hurricane Katrina.
That wasn't the cries of the downtrodden. That's the cries of the useless, the worthless. New Orleans was a welfare city, a city of parasites, a city of people who could not and had no desire to fend for themselves. You have a hurricane descending on them, and they sit on their fat asses and wait for somebody else to come rescue them.
Muslims are some of Bortz's favorite targets.
It's Ramadan, and Muslims in your workplace might be offended if they see you eating at your desk. Why? I guess it's because Muslims don't eat during the day during Ramadan. They fast during the day and eat at night. Sort of like cockroaches.
Reverend Chris Bice says he's heard that kind of language before.
If you look at the history of situations like in Rwanda in 1994, talk radio was a big part of leading to the conditions that created a genocide. The Hutu radio disc jockeys would call the Tutsis cockroaches. And there is the sense that these aren't human beings. They're not human beings with children or grandchildren. These are cockroaches. And when you hear in talk radio that liberals are evil, that they are traitors, that they are godless, that they are on the side of the terrorists, that's hate language. You don't negotiate with evil people. You don't live in community with people you consider to be traitors.
Millions of Americans tune into right-wing talk radio every day. Rory O'Connor is a media critic and a liberal himself who's written a book on shock talkers. He says not all of these broadcasters use violent language, but they do all share a predilection for outrage. And he says they're all practically addicted to constantly cranking up that outrage.
Here's the real problem. When you shock somebody,
If you come back the next time and you apply the same stimulus, it's not shocking any longer. It's already happened. So you have to ratchet it up a little bit. So how do you cut through? How do you really shock? And I think that in order to continue to outrage, you have to constantly be jacking up the pressure. And ultimately, there's going to be some deranged person out there in that audience who's going to say, you know what, that's a good idea, let me act on that.
The fusion of entertainment and enlightenment.
Entertainers. That's what a lot of the shock talkers call themselves. O'Connor says maybe, but their words can motivate their listeners to act.
Now, first and foremost, we have to recognize that many of them are employed across multiple platforms. So they may say something on their radio show, but they may repeat it on their television show. They may then repeat it in their newspaper column. They may repackage the ideas into their best-selling books.
The debate over the immigration reform bill became a case study for Rory O'Connor. As arguments went back and forth, some of the language turned venomous. Hosts amped up their audience's outrage with attacks on the bill's supporters and verbal assaults on immigrants.
I already have received at least one brilliant email today about the immigration problem. This person sent me an email, said, when we defeat this illegal alien amnesty bill and when we yank out the welcome mat and they all start going back to Mexico, as a going-away gift, let's all give them a little box of nuclear waste. Tell them it'll heat tortillas.
But do you understand what the New York Times wants and the far left want? They want to break down the white Christian male power structure, of which you're a part, and so am I. And they want to bring in millions of foreign nationals to basically break down the structure that we have.
Right-wing talk radio hosts usually reserve their ad hominem attacks for liberal figures. Jim Quinn has his own name for the National Organization for Women.
The National Organization for Whores. They're whores for liberal politics in general, and they were whores for Bill Clinton in particular.
Glenn Beck tried to connect former Vice President Al Gore's efforts against global warming with Nazism.
What was the first thing they did to get people to exterminate the Jews? Now, I'm not saying that anybody's going to, Al Gore's not going to be rounding up Jews and exterminating them. It is the same tactic, however. You got to have an enemy to fight. And when you have an enemy to fight, then you can unite the entire world behind you and you seize power. That was Hitler's plan. His enemy, the Jew. Al Gore's enemy, the UN's enemy, global warming.
American politics has always been a rough game. But political scientist Jeffrey Feldman, who's written a book on the effects of angry political rhetoric, says this is different.
Our system is a deliberative democracy, and that deliberative democracy depends on a certain kind of talk, a certain conversation in order to function well. What right-wing rhetoric does when it reaches that violent pitch is it undermines that particular conversation such that the focus of political debate becomes increasingly hamstrung by fear, and the ability of citizens to engage in the basic act of civics becomes gummed up. That conversation breaks down.